everybody for coming to One Book, One Bronx. It's usually a Bronx-based book club. We meet at Casita Maria. Casita Maria is a community organization in the Bronx. We partnered with them to present a book club in their space. They've been kind enough to, once this whole COVID issue started, we kind of produced it online, and that's where you guys are part of right now. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out or staying in and joining us. Again, it is normally, we get, I think last week we had about 30, 35 people, maybe 40 at times. The whole idea is we pick a book, we read that book in sections, and then we come together to talk about the book. Normally when we meet in person, we give free books to everyone, or to at least the first 25 people. Because we are meeting online now, we couldn't give out free books. So we encouraged everyone to buy books from your local bookstore or download the ebook. But more than anything, we wanted you to stay connected to this community. The whole idea is to come together and discuss ideas, to discuss issues that affect you, to discuss your community, your neighbors, but to do it through the prism of a book. So every 5 weeks, we read a different book. Right now, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are reading Daughters of the Stone by Dahlma Llanos, who is actually a local author. She lives in Riverdale, born and raised, I believe, in the Bronx. I'm not exactly sure, but in the New York area. We're about 40% through the book. I'm thoroughly enjoying the book. We have a facilitator. Branden Janese is the facilitator of the book club. I just organize everything, and then we hire different facilitators to come in and really lead the conversation. And even though we want them to lead it, we want everyone to feel engaged to talk during the discussion. So, of course, we don't want everybody jumping in at the same time. That said, we don't want people just laying back if they have something to say. If you have nothing to say, just come, hang out, eat your dinner, enjoy all of our beautiful faces. But if you do have something to say, don't hesitate in joining in the conversation. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and Branden will now take over, the facilitator. She'll now take over the rest of the evening. We're here we usually start around 7 o'clock, and it ends at about 8:30. Branden?
Hello, everyone. Thank you. And on that note, hello. I have so many great things to say about this book, but just kind of on the note that Ron was just saying, anyone that is just starting the book or came last week, I kind of wanted to just briefly open up the floor for anyone that wanted to say something, or maybe something they had been mulling on since last week that they thought about concerning the first 5 chapters that they wanted to bring into the discussion today. And if you do, you can just kind of unmute yourself, or even like Lillian, who didn't join us last week but got caught up this week. Anything from the first 5 chapters that we didn't talk about last week that anyone wants to bring onto the Zoom? No?
I have something to say. So last week I haven't read anything about it, so I just was listening to what others was saying, and I went to be very, I would say, upset about what I heard about the book. Just the details of the book at that time that the character went through, talking about Fela. It was very strong, and I know it's a story. I know it happened, based on the fact of the slavery and all the stuff, but it was kind of hard to kind of digest. I don't know if I'm making sense. Like the details that was giving, they were very strong, and it kind of took me to a place that I felt very uncomfortable and hurt.
Mm. Talk a little more about that. Because I agree with you. I thought that the first 5 chapters were very violent.
Yes, and at some point I remember you saying that the author used her power to write the book in a way that it was very elegant, very, artistic, let's say, in that thing. But at the same time, she kept going to really the point, what was to describe those scenarios that happen. So even though just the way the people that read the chapters were talking about it, sorry, that's my dog. Oh my God. So the way that people were describing the chapter, it was powerful and kind of like very emotional, deep. But it was very deep. It's like it was a different way you're feeling deeper. Like it's not when you watch a movie and you kind of see the movie and the movie stay with you for kind of day. That was more profound, more intense. And I don't know if a lot of the information that I was giving, me as a person from the Caribbean, like I kind of connect a lot to what the things that I was saying. I don't know, it stood with me. And then when I started reading, I like, oh, now that's what I feel. Like again, going back to the details and those things. I didn't finish what I needed to read today, but I can't wait to go tonight and finish. Like it's very, it attracts you. Like it's very powerful reading.
Yeah, and I was telling Ron with you, thank you for that. And I was telling Ron before you all got here that the writer, I think part of why she's so powerful is because, yes, Ron, I agree. And part of the reason that this author is so powerful, I think, is because of the language she uses is so simple. She's not trying to trump us with big intellectual words or really crazy themes. Everything is just, it's bare bones. And I think that's the nudeness of it is what makes it so powerful for me.
I think another reason why it's so powerful is that it acknowledges the African presence in Latin America, which is something that has been dismissed and not acknowledged and not written about enough. And now there's this surge of African Latinidad that's like coming out of nowhere. When I mean, Ron can because our folks are from the same country, so I'm sure you can agree with me. I mean, when we were younger, it was like, no, you don't speak Spanish. How can you speak Spanish? Because of our skin color. And I appreciate that the Africanness of being Latino that's what this book is about. That's what this story is about. The Africanness that is so prevalent in Latin America that tends to be dismissed.
Yes.
I was a teenager. My father's from Honduras, and as is Mercy's, and I was a teenager before I heard any of my father's family speak Spanish. And they all spoke Spanish fluently, but I was literally a teenager before I heard any of them speak Spanish. They were always just like Black, African American, and not, even though they loved their identity and their culture and all that, but it seemed to be secondary to being African American.
Right.
Yeah, and I love how the author doesn't shy away from using the word Black.
No.
She did it on purpose. Yeah.
No, that's what they are. They're Black. Yeah. I mean, it's not even a choice. It's not even an option. It's like, yes, I am Black and I'm Latina. I mean, I can't pick one or the other, and that's where the brilliance of this piece comes in. Just the fact that it acknowledges the Africanness in Latin America. where, yes, slaves were taken to Latin America. 97% of Africans were taken to Latin America from Africa. Right. And we need to acknowledge that and respect the African roots of our Latinidad, all people.
But I also appreciate about what's written in this book as well. Yes, that it's very comfortable reading. It's very relatable to me. But what I also appreciated that not only does she bring the truth about our heritage, right? She also brings the truth about our religion and how it's so infused in our day-to-day, even presently, right? So as soon as I started to read the significance of Fela, I immediately connected, and I knew exactly where the basis of her language, her practice, and it was at the point where the hacienda, or the what do you call it, el campo, where she was brought up. It was until she decided to rename it Caridad. I can't remember its formal name, but she renamed it, and it was all connected to this very strong religious practice and belief that it has its origin in African roots, right? And more so in the Yoruba religion. So I really appreciated the fact that she made it very clear about our religion, and she didn't dismiss it, and she put it right out there. And it continues in so far as, even though with the use in the word of bruja, how she's being looked at as a bruja, but it's because that in fact is the religion that many of us, I can't say all of us, but that many of us connect with, and still, have a belief in. So I really appreciated that, how she brought that into the mix, into the story.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, even from the first chapter, the presence of spirituality and religion and Black skin and its connection to the earth.
And the water, right?
And the water, right? What was really powerful to me in the start of these pages we read, chapter 6, was how the author, I'm really interested in knowing a few things, like how you feel about this, but one of them is how we started off with Fela, who was nonverbal because she had her tongue cut out. And then we start off with her daughter, Mati, who is nonverbal because she's a baby and in the beginning, right? And has these magical powers that is obviously very strange to everyone else.
Can I ask a question about that, Branden? Because you asked if there were any questions about the first 5 chapters, and this might have been covered last week. I had to leave a little early last week, and I'm gonna have to leave a little early today, sorry. So sorry if I missed anything. So with Fela, what happened to Fela? Can we, I loved the transition. I loved it. I thought it was masterfully done, like to go from Fela to Mati, and then starting this section with Mati. But then it's like, okay, where is Fela? There was a point in this section where, Fela's in the corner of the bedroom, and I'm like, oh wait, she's here? Wait, I'm like, oh wait, no. Then she receded back into the darkness. I was like, oh no, that was
all related to the spiritualism, right?
Yeah.
So but it had me questioning. I had to go back to page 59. Like, wait a second. Okay, hold on. What happened? Someone tell me. Let's go.
Let's talk about this last too, because Ron and I were confused too, because even in the first 5 chapters, I had to go back and read a couple times when the author so cleverly in one sentence, after we had already met Fela, had said that she had got her tongue ripped out. And I was like, wait, what?
Right.
Yeah.
So Ron and I had questioned that already, but then several people last week were like, wait, hold up, how did Fela die? Like, how did she die? Where did she go? And Sarada, I know you were nodding and smiling. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, that was a question I had too. Like, where did she go? you know, I think there was an assumption, or at least I made the assumption, that she was gonna drown herself at the moment that she's at the river and she's giving birth. But then her body just, you know, her spirit just leaves her, and she's kind of clinging on to the baby, or taking her last breath while she's wrapped around the baby, and then that's it. I mean, I don't know what else. That was,
actually,
you know, that was my take on it.
I think it's all related to the belief in her religion, and all really, you know, the spirituality. And she came across to me as, you know, as a spirit on earth to accomplish a mission. And she completed her mission, and she was sent back in that world of spiritualism and mysticism that is really part of the religion, and the belief that there are people here for a purpose, for a mission, and they know and they realize that their time is here. And that's why she keeps having this conversation with, I don't know what's the matter with me today, but with this person that she says in the very beginning, who caressed her and gave her the stone, remember?
Emo,
thank you.
her husband.
So exactly. So to me, Emo is another spiritual being within that world of mysticism and spirituality that exists. So
yeah,
the way that I looked at it is that she was there, and she went to this other place of spiritualism.
If I may, the whole idea is that Fela and Emo made a promise, but they weren't able to complete their promise, and she felt she was punished because her mission from the deities was to tell them of the impending danger that their village was going to be ransacked. And she failed to say that because she wanted to do this with Emo. She wanted to create their baby. And then that was the punishment then, that Emo was killed, the village was ravaged, and now she had a punishment that she had to fulfill to finish that promise because of what she failed to do when she was supposed to tell the elders about her dream. That's my understanding of it. So now she fulfilled her promise by the baby, but at one point she didn't want to go. She wanted to stay with the baby. And that's when the Lady Oshun, the deity, was going to then take the baby instead of her. And she made that sacrifice, take me, and fulfill that promise that she made so long ago.
Yeah, that's right, because at one point the baby wasn't breathing, wasn't living, and the baby revived because she exchanged. But it's all still very related and interconnected to this world of spirituality and this nonverbal communication and understanding of the purpose of her being here, and how she has to fulfill this, you know, this mandate of the upper gods, right? And her constant conversation with Ochun is very real about what her purpose is, and how she has to fulfill this purpose here.
Tasha, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that Evelyn said most of it, but it's also the fact that it was in addition to her fight, she was like, oh my God, the love of this baby, you know, I want to stay here. But she was still toiling with it. It wasn't until Emo came back that reminded her. You know what I mean? So she still needed an additional pull to be like, nah, you did what you had to do. The time is bad. And for me, I thought it was really beautiful, like this return back to the water. And like that was enough. You know what I mean? Like we didn't need the specificity. Okay, around that transition, because again, it speaks to the spirituality. It was merely a transition from one place to the next, a return to home, and the gift of Mate was there to carry on the legacy.
It was almost kind of something that can't be explained, right? It was like the spirituality, religion at that deep of a place, at that deep of a plane, it can't be explained, not in words at least. So I think that's why Lydia, we kind of see her coming back, not necessarily as a ghost, but as a spirit or a guide, if you will. I mean, one thing that I really wanted to ask y'all about, and I'm going to bring it up early just in case I don't have time, but along those same lines, right, of Fela and her commitment to having a child and her guilt for not fulfilling her first task, which was warning the elders that the village was about to be ransacked. For that chapter, not as much, but for this chapter, one thing that really stood out to me was revenge, and the idea of revenge, the theme of revenge. You know, I think like two things, really truly, three things truly make the world go round. I think one is spirituality and religion. I think one is music, vibrations. And I think the other is revenge. I think revenge, more specifically, familial, family revenge, protecting my father's honor, that type of revenge keeps the world going round. What do y'all think about that idea of revenge and protecting your mother's honor, like in these pages? More specifically, chapters like 6 to 8.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's so interesting because I see it as justice. I see it as an alternative form of justice that's being done here. And it's so interesting that it happens in the next generation. So it's like in the previous generation, there's just ridiculous amounts of violence and horror. And so in this next generation, here's the justice, here's the restitution. And so that's what I'm kind of, and I'm interested to see how that theme will play out in the future generations. Like seeing how the daughters are rectifying the wrongs that were done against their mothers.
Yes.
And can I just also add too with so my thing about revenge, I also feel, I agree that it was justice. For me, I feel revenge happens in a faster, has a faster momentum, right? Matai waited. She was like, yep, it's coming. It will come. And there was a patience that she had. And it made me think about how Tia had talked to her about her powers with the pig. She was like, you need to listen from within to know when is the right time to use your powers. So she wasn't zapping people left and right the minute, she wasn't pew, 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 pew. She was just like, so you're gonna take this land from me. Okay, I got something for your whole ass. Just give me a minute.
Right.
Yeah. Nicole, you want to say something?
Yeah, like I was just gonna say, like what was really striking to me is how she kind of just summarizes it and justifies and ties together what the reader is thinking when she's like in the room with the guy in the house, and she's like she treated him with about as much compassion as he had for her like entire people, basically, which I thought was really powerful because like this is completely justified. Not only like obviously like was her entire bloodline like in slavery, but also she was like literally gaslit out of not having the land that was rightfully owned to her. And she was taught completely that the interaction that she had on his deathbed did not even happen, or was completely like they had to denounce this whole other man just to keep her story from being true.
Yeah.
And that was coming from people like men that said that they were like of God and like spiritual supposedly. So like, and then when she has like, I think his name's Cheo, like the boyfriend or whatever, when he's like, no, there's no way, like what did you have to do to do this? And she was like, I did nothing that was out of what I should have done. I took my time and I waited, and I like it's rightfully mine. So
yeah,
that was really striking about that.
Yeah. Someone else was gonna say something.
I was going to say, you know, what struck me about, you used the word revenge, and they made a point about saying that she didn't act out of revenge, that she was acting to restore balance. And it wasn't out of greed. It wasn't out of spite. It was just, I want to restore balance. And I want to create, almost recreate the village back in Africa on the hacienda, on Caridad now. So this was her mission. And so she saw this as a promise that perhaps her mother, that she owed her mother and her mother's people. So this wasn't, I didn't see it as revenge. I saw it a little differently. Although it does look like, you know, she got even, didn't she? She got her land back, she got her property back. But I didn't see it coming out of a negative place.
Yeah, I think oftentimes that word revenge has like a negative kind of tone or a ting to it. But I think in this sense, it's almost an honor. Is that too big of a word to use?
It seems necessary to me. If you are a slave or in that system of slavery, you can't sort of negotiate that like in a legal way, because the way they set it up, it was supposed to be her land legally, but they just went around that. So I don't know if you can respect the law if the law is not going to respect you, which is kind of some of the things we see even today. But
yeah, I mean, one thing. Did anyone else want to chime in?
I wanted to say that. I'm sorry.
But
like very small moment where my attention went like, oh my God, I had to read this back to see if I got it. One of them was about the baby. When the baby was left, and all the coconuts and everything was going down and the baby survived. I was like, oh my God. Another one was when this part where what they're describing the former slave having been free and now using the slave and kind of doing exactly what people did to them. And it was like kind of remarkable to what happened right now. Like, you know, you go through the process, you know how that feel, and you still mistreat people. Like, you know, like you might expect that if you already know how that feel, you wouldn't do that. That was powerful in that sense, yes, to kind of connect that. Even though that book was published many, many years ago, we're still seeing the same theme play out.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I was gonna piggyback off of what Ron was saying about the law. It's just funny also how the law didn't uphold its own law, right? When Don Thomas, like, he brought these men, paid them buku about the dollars to uphold his wishes, and then literally outside of the door, they're like, nah, chill, we're not gonna do that. He's been a problem when he's alive. He's gonna be a problem when he's dead. Nah, we're gonna just, so to see how people were still manipulating the things for their own personal gain, it's like, the law ain't shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's still true. Like, it's so funny how that's like a parallel now, because like a lot of times people want to bring up the law as a way to justify the fact that like all kinds of unequal like practices in this country, like that's supposed to mean something more than like humanity and like other values. Like just because it's on a piece of paper, that makes it like true or like valuable, when there's like so many groups of people that have lived their entire lives without ever writing anything down and keeping things in their bodies and in their minds.
Which is
Nicole, I'm really glad you said that. I was just going to bring that up when Mati and Cheeto are having a conversation about, and he's telling her about, I think he calls them Los Blancos, and like the records that, and the records that they, like, you got to see it. These people write everything down, you know, it's amazing, you know, and I feel in my heart and in my mind that she can't even understand why that would even be important, not even a little bit, right, to write something down. And I think that's partially because of who she is and the magic that she's like just kind of starting to learn and see that she's different and the strangeness that she has. But I also think that because like kind of what Ron was saying, like she's seen how people who write things down behave. Like she saw that. She's kind of a product of that. So it's almost like, why would I get involved in that world? Why would I get involved in those people's lives? Why would I try to mimic and mock the things that they do?
Well, I think it's also interesting that she ends up being right in that discussion. Like when he comes back and she's like, I did it my way. Like you're like she knew it was on the papers. It didn't matter that she couldn't read. And it also didn't matter that it was written down.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, like she was right about how it needed to be handled. And also like the fact that he trusted that because he was able to read and write, like he was like, this must be important. So I've learned it. And he like learned it because he got a little bit of like power and respect and money. So like as soon as he was like as soon as he was like within reaching distance, he was okay, let's try doing it like the like law way and the way that like everyone has been doing it. Like he started trusting that system as soon as he got a little bit of power within it.
Lily, can you say just a little more about that? Just like about how when you become, just say a little bit more about that, because I'm really curious, because I feel we all do it. Like when you get a little bit of that white supremacy up in you, it's hard to shake it off.
Right. Well, I think she brings it up earlier with the overseer guy whose name I don't remember.
Romero.
Yeah. Because she says it like flat out. She's like he's worse because he can see, like he can basically see how close he is to not having any power, so he abuses his power. And so I think she's really interestingly exploring like the amount of power you get and then what you do with that. Like, do you turn it around? Do you, if you like get a small amount of power, do you start like buying into this like larger power structure? Like, how do you respond to like the small amounts of power that have been granted to you? I don't know.
I think that's a really brilliant question.
Like, which is like a moral quandary that I think we all ultimately face, no matter when we're living. Like,
yeah. Or I guess for me, when I say that, and I wonder what you guys think about, what you people think about this. We talked about this in the first meeting, just about the dignity of work and how even though like Fela and Tia were enslaved, they had a very powerful dignity in their work and they're the masters of their craft, like sewing these beautiful dresses. And I was wondering, like, kind of piggyback off of that, there is a scene when Mati like breaks Cheeto's leg, and then there's the conversation they have afterwards, and really the way she kind of coerces him into letting her heal him is by saying that you won't be able to work in the fields, in the sugarcane fields, like if I don't fix your leg. And that's what like gets him to let her heal his leg. What do you guys think about that? Like that's how like a big attachment, maybe even a love and a desire for the work that they had, that, I mean, his girl broke his leg. Like, all right,
I looked at it more like, you know, a status, you know, and I think that, you know, what was very real in that time is that even within the slave encampment, there were these tiers that you were assigned. And if you were, I guess, the overseer, like more Romero, I guess, like that was probably the highest that you could get in a slave encampment. So I saw it more as, do you want to lose your status? You know, if your leg is not healed, and do you want to go back to, you know, do you want to demote yourself? So I looked at it more as you're going to lose your status as to who you are. And I saw that as well, like with Romero, and I think he was a jerk. I mean, you know, to say it nicely for me, to say it nicely, but it's also real that was the time that if you were given the role of an overseer, that you did these atrocities, some of it based on the fact that you hated what you were doing, you hated the position that you were at, and you hated who you were. And he was, you know, he was a mixed race, so that made it even more powerful for him to have that self-hatred that he had for himself, and then he projected it on his own people. But just going back to the situation with Cheo broke his leg, I think it was when she said that to him, I think it was like, you're going to lose your status of who you are in this encampment.
I also think in addition to status, I mean, I think, and this might be linked to status, but I think it's also a sense of worthiness, a sense of worth, right? Yes. Like we're known by the things that we can do and things that we are able to produce, even if that work is enslaving you, right? I mean, there was some irony there, right? Like to say, oh my gosh, I won't be able to work. You are a slave, right? And the fact that he is saying to himself, I won't be able to engage in this slavery. I mean, someone else might say, wow, if your leg is broken, you won't have to, you know, work in the fields. Great. And he's saying, no, I am known by my work, even if this work is keeping me active, right? I'm known by my work. And I think that's also just part of the humanity of things. I think even like when you think about those who start to become of age, like even think about in our society how we cast away our elderly at times, right?
Well, that's why she said
them as useless when they have so much wisdom, right? And so they may see, you don't have as much utility anymore because you can't work, right? Your body is frail or whatever have you. I think it's also a construct of society where we cast away what is not working, so to speak, right? So I think, yes, it's status. And I also think it's almost like we're hardwired. We almost kind of take in, or we engage in the work of the oppressor, even if it's to our own demise, right? We're like, okay, I need to work. Like I'm known by my work. If I can't work, then I'm not worthy. I'm not, I
have no value.
I have no value, right? Even if your value is connected or linked to someone else, right? So I think it speaks to, I think it speaks to that, and I think it speaks to the internalization of the oppressor as well.
There also seemed to be like a warped machismo involved with that.
I can definitely see that.
Even within the system of slavery, there's a hierarchy, and the men are at the top of that kind of ladder or chain. And it was like about them going into the field and, being able to cut the most cane in one day and things like that. That's how I almost saw it completely as machismo.
Yeah, but even with the woman, there was a sense of like, the status that you held, because as the how did they call him? But as the women who were doing the embroidery, which I can't think of the name right now, they called them. They were treated differently. They were like in a different category because they were getting this special treatment from La Doña. So all I got from that, and which is not new to any of us, is the fact that even in that terrible enslaved society, there was this rush to get to this certain status because it gave you the status of being different, of not being la cocinera or the one who was dumping out the pot, the chamber pot or something like that. There were all these little areas that you can quote move up to, and for him it was like, I don't want to lose that status. And that's why she brought that example of, do you want to be left with the old men who are just kind of picking up the leftover caña and you're just dragging behind them? It was like, it was really, I saw it more as a status. And yes, it was the piece of the machismo, but even with the women, there was this different status as well, right? Based on the job that you did or didn't do.
But not only that, I saw the role of women as behind the scenes, but they were really the ones in power. Doña Filomena was the one who fed all the ideas to her husband, and then he implemented it, and she did it in such a manipulative way that he thought it was his idea all along. I was also interested in how powerful Josefa was. Okay. Josefa, she was the one who decided, once Doña Filomena was out of the picture, what to do. When she sent for the doctor, she was in power. She was in control of the hacienda in many different ways. So women were denied the role of the power, but in reality, they were in power there.
Oh, still are. Okay.
I wanted to say something about the previous coming. The way I saw that scene with Sheo, it was more like, I don't know, let me see the word, persevering, resilience. Because due to the fact that he couldn't do the work anymore in the cañaveral, he was able to develop the new skill or doing the work, right?
Yeah.
Somebody that went through this issue of being in some way almost disabled to perform a certain job, but now, you know, with time and with practice, he was able to develop all the skill. It's like, I found that like the author tried to convey this idea. You might go through something and something might not go that way, but there's always an opportunity to try something out. That makes sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I definitely can agree with you. Lily, what were you going to say? Lily and Weber?
I was just gonna say about the work and the status. It also like offered them a certain amount of protection. Like it was very feeble and it was very fickle. But like the guy that Tio Josefa loved, I forget his name too. Yeah, he for as long as it lasted, they like wouldn't let him be beaten because he was able to do a lot of work. And like when Fela goes into town, she doesn't get like attacked by those men because she's good at sewing. And like obviously it's the most weak of protections because it's so contingent on like your ability to do things, which also feels like it has parallels to right now. But I think it was not necessarily just about status. It was also about like what that ability could like protect you from.
Yeah. Tasha, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, damn, I was gonna say a whole lot of stuff. I thought also it was a part of when he was thinking about potential suitors. Because I think there was a thought when he broke his leg, he was like, oh, but what about the women that I could potentially mate with? So it was also about sowing his wild oats if he wanted to later on.
Right.
I think is also something to consider. And then to piggyback off what someone else said about you finding something new, I felt that it was more about returning to something that was important, right? By him getting his accident, what happened with his leg, he was able to return to something that spoke to legacy. Because initially, when the dad made the box for Fela, he didn't understand about spirit living in wood before it comes to them, right? So having to be put in this position, he was able to regain not only that knowledge, but also a sense of pride of what that knowledge and relationship is with nature and spirituality, and then transcend that even further to even maybe surpass his dad. So I think there's something very important about returning to something that has been long forgotten, and having that be a part of your evolution.
Somebody's tea is done. Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. That was my kind of next point, is about how when he does go back home, if you will, he's changed, but nothing really around him has changed in the woodworking shop, right? And so he kind of has to like adapt to home, which sounds crazy, but I was thinking about that also in the sense of like going back home. What does that mean to somebody whose home has been stolen? You know, in the first pages that we read, Tia keeps telling Fela, like, you're not going back home. You know what I'm saying? Get that out of your head. This is the new normal. You need to adjust here, and you can't be in two places at once. So it was that coupled with Mati being born and kind of being born on stolen land, a stolen baby almost in a sense, being born. She can't go back home. She doesn't have any home to go to, you know? She's on her home. That is her home, and it was still stolen. And then in the sense of just the connection with ancestors that you've never met, a connection with unknown ancestors, that really resonated to me, like driving things home and what that means to people who were stolen. More specifically with Mati, when in the scene where she's at Don Tomas's bedside and he's handing her the papers, there is something so powerful about just those couple sentences. I thought about the supernatural connection when the mother was like in the room and the curtains, and but what I also thought about was like that idea, right, of lost fatherhood. That is a really real trauma for a lot of Black and Latinx women who just like didn't have their father around. They were not there. Mati's father was there technically, but he wasn't there. You know, they met the day he died, you know, and he was totally okay with enslaving her. So that idea of home and what it means to have to like recreate, or I guess create for the first time, a home when you've never had one.
Hi, everyone. I think that it really speaks to the strength and the ingenuity of us as a people that we're able to do what has been said is undoable, the unthinkable, the unimaginable, to create a home in a place that's totally foreign. And another thing I just wanted to talk about briefly, the conversation that Mati has with Cheo about him leaving and her staying, and they grew up and saw the very same things, but we see how it impacted each of them so differently. And it reminds me of other conversations that have been had time and time again. Well, why did you leave? How could you stay? And the same things were present, and the same things shaped both of them, but they actually split them apart. But what's beautiful is that they were able to come back together and to find a way to live with everything that they had witnessed and the choices that each had made. So I loved it. Loved it.
But will they really come back together? That we're kind of at
for
that,
a moment.
yeah.
Because there is this sense of foreshadowing that something is looming on the horizon. We don't know what yet, but I strongly felt that, especially when she talked about, she did refer to it as revenge, and I wondered how that set with her after the talk from Tia about listen to your voice. Was her voice really to do that way? I mean, I think it was justice, of course. I'm not doubting that it was justice, but I have to wonder if that was the best use of her skill, because Tia also told her, remember, when you do things, even for what seems to be good, there are consequences, as with the little, I think, was it the small animal who did not survive after she saved it. So we'll see.
Yeah, she's like, I've accepted the consequences, but I don't think we found out what the consequences are yet.
Exactly, that looming, what is from. Yes.
Well, I think that's a really powerful part of the book too, because I mean, you kind of get generations of women learning different things. For example, with Tia, I feel like at the beginning, she was terrified when she kind of watched Mati grow up. I think she was a bit terrified, like, oh, I'm gonna have to let a very special thing go that I raised. I'm gonna have to let her go at some point. She's not gonna be mine anymore. And I think that was kind of like a terrifying thought for her as an older woman, right? To have to raise something and then have to like let it go. I mean, when I was reading this, I just remember the look in my mom's eyes when I left home at 18. And now I get it, you know, now I understand that look. But for Mati, I think it's very terrifying for her to just try to like navigate the world, like with these kind of like magical healing powers. And not knowing what to do with them, not knowing if you do save something and it was meant to die is kind of like the ebb and the flow, messing up the butterfly effect and trying to like navigate that. Sarada, can you talk really quickly about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of struggled with Theo's decision to leave Mati kind of in the, I think it was chapter 8 or chapter 9, I'm not sure exactly, but when they have this chance to be together, and he says that he really wants to provide for her, he really wants to give her this life now that he's a kind of a known woodworker in the city. He wants to do all of these things and have children with her, et cetera, and she decides that she you know, she wasn't going to go that route, and that she really wanted to stay you know, at the plantation and reclaim her land. I just read it as, yes, I see the sense that he probably felt very traumatized by by having to stay on the plantation to be with her. But I also read it as a moment where he was just very confronted by her kind of unwillingness to just kind of, you know, hitch on his bandwagon and just start this family. And I really thought that, you know, she was really, really confronting him, and he probably kind of saw it as a moment where she was, you know, coming really like face to face with his manhood and like, you know, saying that I am going to, as a woman, I'm going to provide for myself. I'm going to reclaim my land. This has not, you know, this has nothing to do with you. This is what I'm doing for myself. And I saw it A, as a very feminist moment, and B, that, you know, Tio probably is more preoccupied with masculinity and manhood than we think, especially if you factor in Ron's earlier comment. You know, the only reason why he allowed Mate to heal him was because he didn't want to look bad in front of his boys, basically. So I thought it was a very kind of progressive moment in the book, also, you know, very feminist moment in the book. And I'm wondering about other people's kind of perception about that decision that she made.
Yeah. Nicole, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, my internet cut completely out for a second, but I'm back. But one thing I just wanted to kind of like bring up is how, like, I've noticed in a lot of, because I'm in a class and it's literally just about like Afro-Latinidad in New York and all the different ways that like manifests and creates like communities, and a really big pattern, and like pretty much every single one is like the power of like chosen family, and how like, and I really saw that in this book, because there's like examples where like you have like Santeria houses with like literally adopted like godchildren, and then you have like ballroom culture where it's like a house with a mother and a father and things like that, and how that's like what people have. And I'm seeing that in this book because she's like, no, like these are my people, like everyone's gonna get their house, we're all gonna live on this land, and it's gonna be like ours. And I feel like that's a really big pattern in like marginalized communities, and I think that's really powerful because like you can either choose to go off on your own and try to make it, or you can like stay with your family and help them because that's what you have. And that's what like she was brought up in a chosen family of all these women who are working in the taller, but like she can't just go away from that just because she's being like, she's in love with him, I guess.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yes, that was really generous. And kind of just to piggyback off that, does anyone else have anything to add about just the intergenerational idea of home in Black and Latinx communities? How multiple generations live in one house. Where I'm from in Michigan, it's not really like that. You don't really see like that. You don't see like grandma in the house. You don't see like, you know, sister with the baby in the house. You don't see like the couple who owns the house and their 4 kids. You don't really see that. Every family kind of lives in their own house, and you like visit grandma, you know, but you visit grandma at grandma's house. When I moved to New York, or when I would just come visit New York, even as a teenager, a lot of my friends, if not all of my friends, their abuela lived in the house with them. It's just multi-generational. We all live here together. It's multi-generational. There's babies, there's grandmas, there's everybody. And
that's
actually,
my life. You just described my life, Branden. I bought a house many years ago that's a 2-family house, so all my family could be here. That's how my parents raised us. We all lived together. Since I retired, I've been going back and forth to Puerto Rico, and I'll spend 3-4 months there in my sister's house, and we're building a larger house so that we can all be together, me and my siblings and the grandkids and everybody. So that has been my heritage. That's what our family was always brought up to, you know, familia después de Dios, which is family after God. And so in Puerto Rico, that's very, very common, where a multi-generational family living together or in close quarters. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, my father bought my mother a home here in the Bronx only because she had family back in Puerto Rico that she had a commitment to bring them to New York because everybody was starving back home. And so that was the promise that he had to make to her in order for her to even agree to marry him. So this is something that has been ingrained in our family for many generations. So, and I find that odd when everybody, my kids still all live in the Bronx, My family lives here in my house. So very common practice.
And sometime when, let's say, one part of the family, one person from the family decide to like go in a different way, that is being criticized and being like, oh, we don't do that. Because I remember when my niece, she finished college, she came back and she didn't want to go back to live with my sister. She wanted to be independent, you know, having a job, having her own apartment. And my sister almost had a heart attack. Like, how are you going to do that? You know, because it's the expectation that you live together until, at least in part of my family, until you get married or you become independent with your own family. But then everybody is staying together, you know, the grandmother, the grandfather, everybody will be like a continuation of the family. I think it's a cultural thing.
Yeah, it is definitely cultural. Because I don't want any of my relatives in my house. None of them. Not a one.
That's why I have a two-family house. They're downstairs.
I moved this far from where I grew up just so my friends couldn't find me.
It's so true, though. My visual doesn't work. I'm Vivi, but my father came to New York City from Puerto Rico, and the first thing he did when he got his job and saved money is that they bought a brownstone. They bought a tenement building, 8 apartments. There's 4 bedrooms in each apartment, with the intent that each aunt would have an apartment in the building. Yeah. And the grandma had her own. And then it sounds funny. It's like, we still live like this till this day. Their children have moved. We use these apartments as starter homes because now their children moved in there, saved money to buy their own house, but they would still meet. We were never in each other's house. It's like we would meet at grandma's for Sunday dinner, but we respected our spaces. And we grew up in Little Italy in the Bronx, and all of my Italian friends, it's the same thing. It's very cultural to keep grandma at home, but she has her own apartment in your same, where you live, you know?
Mercy?
I was gonna,
go ahead, Tasha.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tasha.
I was gonna say to what Sarada was saying about Chero about his manhood. I don't think it was about that at all. I just think he didn't want to be traumatized anymore. He's just like, this space carries energy. Let's move on. It's a lot. Like, let's run for the hills. Like, we don't have to do that. But at the same time, too, I do appreciate that he was like, when he realized that she wasn't gonna budge, he was like, I bet. You know, like they respected the boundaries that were made from both sides. I think it came from a genuine place of like, let's make an oath to do no more harm, because it was generations that had been impacted by that. So let's just like start anew. So that was that. And then to talk about like the families, it's interesting, like, culturally, because my parents are from Haiti and my dad has a house, but guess what? My aunts and my uncles live in the second apartment, right? My grandmama house, the uncles, the aunts, everybody, at least someone in the family lived in that house at one point. But it's interesting now how that is to our detriment with what's going right now with Corona, right? And how it's not just wiping out just one person in the family, it's wiping out generations, right? You have uncles, grandmas, aunts, mothers, brothers, sisters, unfortunately being, transitioning early because of the close proximity. So I'm just seeing how now that what was something that was cherished and relished is now something that's harmful. Just very interesting.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Mercy, did you have a comment?
I just want to offer an example that's the alternative to the stories that everyone is presenting here, where I'm the youngest of 7 children, and my siblings, except for my second oldest, all of my other siblings, I was the only one born here. They did not want to come here. And yet my parents more so my mother brought them here with the promise and the American dream and this whole idea of things will be better for you here and so forth and so on. It's not like things weren't bad for them in Honduras because they were actually pretty good for them. But it was just the idea of the American dream being better than whatever they had over there. So I feel like my siblings have spent their lives looking for a home where I cannot even fathom living with any of them, as they themselves can't even fathom living with any of the rest of us. You know, there was never a talk or a discussion of us buying a house together. And I think part of it is simply because they were snatched from their home. And you know, Puerto Rico is different because it's the United States. You know what I mean? It's a different dynamic there. They were snatched. It's still Puerto Rico is a separate culture, but then you have Honduras, which is a completely different citizenship altogether, where you know, if they came here having to hide because they were undocumented, and then they got their green card and then their citizenship, and it's like, oh, okay, so what does this mean? And then they were Black on top of being Latino. So they was snatched from their home, and I think they have spent their lives, and they continue to spend their lives fighting for a place that they call home, because at a young age they were snatched from that space that they felt was always their home. So that's the alternative to the stories that other people are presenting here. Just the idea of home, pretty much.
Yep, and we made it all the way full circle. Was someone else gonna chime in? No? Okay. We have 15 minutes.
Sarada had a question. She was asking why she thought Chero came back. I seen your question, Sarada. I seen your question. I got my thoughts.
Sorry, Sarada.
Yeah, I was wondering. I mean, some people might say, you know, the romantics might say that he just came back because he just, you know, couldn't live without Mati. I don't know. I feel like part of me thinks that he came back because there was nothing. I don't know if he necessarily came back. Okay, so I hesitate to say this, but I kind of have a sense that he came back with nothing, that for whatever reason, things didn't work out in the city, and then he was coming back because he had no other alternative, really. But that's me playing devil's advocate. Sorry, I'm killing all the romantics in the room out there in the virtual environment out here, but
I feel the opposite.
It seemed to me that he had a lot to. It seemed to me that he had to offer. I mean, he talked about, you know, being this highly skilled artisan and how his work was being admired and bought by these, you know, famous rich people, and I guess maybe I may have inferred that they were white. All of them were white rich people.
I think he said important white people.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Important, not just white people, but important white people. So it's I don't know. It seemed like he did have to offer. I think there was an assumption on his behalf that just because he's a man and that he had all these skills and he had money now and he could buy her, what was it, a pair of earrings? I can't remember. He bought something for her, that she should just kind of, you know, fall into my arm kind of thing. But I am, you know, I do have to say, and I guess because I wanted to see the light to something here, that I was, you know, still connecting them as children, and that there was this, you know, childlike bond and love.
They're older now. They're much older now.
No. I mean, but I'm saying from the very beginning when they met, that there was like this connection there, and that Mati always had this love for him, you know, and even though I think she was years, there was difference in years, that she had this love for him, and that I think that he genuinely loved her in some form, whether it was the right love or not, it's questionable, but I think that he really loved her at some, you know, throughout his life. So I don't know, I think I'm one of those out there romantics who say I think there was, you know, there was something there.
A little bit on that point, I do believe that he did love her and she always loved him, but he was disillusioned. He left the town because he was even with all those years and his craft, he still wasn't totally respected. He talks about the time when the priest, like they shortchanged him and nobody did anything, no one did anything about it. And so he wasn't getting the respect that he expected from, I guess, society or whatever. So he went back because that in that place he would be respected and he was loved. You know, and he still resisted when he went back. You know, he was kind of like afraid of Mati and her powers and whatever. But I believe he left the city because he was disillusioned, you know, with how it was going for him.
I felt like he came back a relatively successful person, but he just doesn't want to be on the plantation.
Right.
And he wants their relationship on his terms. So he would rather take Mati to the city than to stay on the plantation, whatever, I can't remember the name they use for it, but to stay on the plantation under her terms.
Right,
and that goes back to the early reference of machismo, that he wants things, like Mati seems to be doing relatively well, almost better than he is, but he still wants her to leave everything she has and go to the city.
Yes.
Yeah, but he also, I think, you know, he also talks about the pain and the memory, which may be an indicator of his weakness, but it may or may not. I don't know. And, you know, and she comes across as being very strong in the sense that, yes, there's all this pain and memories and sufferings of this land, but this is what I want, and this is where I feel that I belong. Whereas he keeps, in some sense to me, he keeps making reference to, how can you be here? It has so many bad memories. It was such a negative place, such a bad place. And I was kind of interpreting that as his weakness of not being able to, you know, to accept and face what happened and kind of confront it. You know, he wanted to go away from it, avoid it, you know, deny it, put it out of sight, out of mind. And so I saw it as a weakness.
But can we not, I'm sorry, I have to push back on using the term weak, because why is it weak to want to not be traumatized anymore? You know what I'm saying? Like,
you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
I feel like we have to be careful with language, because that's something that we still see very much in our spaces. People stay in toxic places to illustrate a sort of type of strength. Right. And like, oh no, I'm strong because I'm still in this toxic place. No. We can go.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I didn't mean to use the word weakness as a negative, but more to explain that I really didn't think that he was coming across as being machismo and wanting to have, but that it was difficult for him to address the pain that he suffered while he was there, and that he visualized and that he saw, and how his father died. And so all of those memories were painful for him. But you're absolutely right. It's incorrect to use the word weakness, but it was my way of explaining that I think that he was just having a terrible time and dealing with those challenges in his life and the reality of things, the pain.
So I do agree with him not wanting to be with the space, but I also feel like he didn't understand Mati's purpose. And so I don't know if you guys remember when they're in the house and he was like, you know, everybody's here, like all the plantation owners, the whippings, all that stuff. But then she reminds him, but so is Fila, so is Tia Josefa, and all the other people that were here. So letting him know that, so yeah, I don't think it was a machismo place, but it's more so like, you need to understand, like there's a purpose and a reasoning that's beyond your comprehension as to why I'm here. And you see him grappling with it when he's in the bed. Because I felt like when he kept questioning her about like what she did to get the land, I felt like he was inferring that she used her body in order to get the land back. Like he was like, damn, no, like she knew it, but I felt like there was like an ambiguity around, did you use, because he didn't want to like believe her powers. So I kind of felt like he was inferring, did you sleep with all these men in order to get that back? And she was like, boy, bye. I got some things. I got some things to do. Okay. The way that that's what I did. And so he had to like then realize, if you're going to take her, you're going to have to take all of her. And that's when he like, when she's about to leave, because she's like, he can't handle it. He holds her back and was like, all right, just I take all of you.
Yeah,
right.
And you're right, and you're right when you say that there was this suspicion on his behalf about she used her body to achieve it, and someplace in the book you can feel that he retrieves from her the way that a man may retrieve from a woman because he may feel that she wasn't, completely sincere with him. So you're right. I think that he definitely took that as that interpretation, her using her body.
Yeah, but I mean, really quickly, don't we already kind of know that he's kind of basic? Like, remember at the beginning when we first meet him and he's talking about going to like Lolitas or wherever they're going? And he's like, but he doesn't go, he like goes to Monty, not knowing that she heard the whole thing, you know what I'm saying, and tries to play her and get leg broke. So you already know he's a little basic to begin with, he's like not a santero, he's like not at that like spiritual level with her. And that is the part that really resonated with me. It was like, I think even when she got to be 25, they were in the story, the author was still like, she had no romantic interest, like men were interested in her, but she was like focused on her work. I think this is like kind of a theme we're going to continue to see, because honestly, Fela, right, never got a chance to really have that love either. And then Tia never got a chance to have her love either. And now we're with and she never gets a chance to get her love either, And so is it the women that are too strong, or is it the men maybe a little too basic? I don't know.
Can I say something?
Yes, Twyla.
To address that, just in defense of Cheo, I think it was necessary for us to see him as imperfect. It was necessary that we see him from a place of growth. We see the immaturity. We see that he's not this superhero, that he too is shaped by those same oppressive forces. So that makes it all the more realistic. And also, I just want to say about manhood, where would he have gotten images of masculinity? Where would he was very limited. So a lot of it had to be placed in his work, his strength, because those were the things that were valued. So
that was perfect. So generous. Thank you so much. We have 6 minutes. I'm not going to go over this time, Ron. Do we have any closing thoughts? Maybe like we could take 3 people, 2 minutes each. 3 times.
One thing that struck me is how like 5, 6, 7 years go by, and then Cheo just rolls up in there and he's ready for action. Like they were just together yesterday. And and that also seemed, again, I'm not giving up on this idea that he's burdened by his own machismo. That even within a system of slavery, there is still a hierarchy, and he's not having no parts of not being on the top of his rung. And that's how I see it. That's how I see it. Like just those simple, silly kind of tropes that men sort of buy into, he's buying into. Not to light a match and then end it in a minute, but
yeah,
I was gonna say page 126, the last page of chapter 10, the second paragraph. I just love the first line: brown bodies glistens in the heady scent of pleasure sweat rather than work sweat. I mean, I highlighted the whole paragraph, but it was just something very beautiful, and just like envisioning Black, brown bodies glistening in their own sweat, like the beads cascading down their bodies, the joy that is happening. I think there was something that said people were jealous of the celebration of human, the celebration or something like that. I think that was just a really beautiful, sacred moment, and that how Jero and Mati were like, nah, we're not gonna get this priest to do our ceremony. We're gonna call on the elders to bless us in a way, community surround us, and then even inviting tongues that they weren't familiar with, that were foreign and familiar at the same time, to like bring in this union. I was like, yes.
Right. Was somebody saying something? Yeah, I agree with you. And I also think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about when we were talking about put the dignity back into work, And it's not, I think she does a really masterful job at making sure that when she is showing these enslaved people working really for free, she shows it with dignity and she shows it with skill, and she almost makes you a little jealous, you know, that you don't have that skill, you don't have it. And it's almost this like magnifying glass, not on the traumas that were slavery 100%, but on the dignity of the people and the human aspect, right, that everyone gets a chance to have outside of their oppressors. Does anyone else want to add some closing thoughts? Sarada?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something that kept me wondering. When it said that none of the men, as she got her land back, none of those men were able to then have children. And she talked about her paying a price, and it kind of made me wonder. I read a little ahead because I was so like intrigued. Yeah. But it, you know, I just was wondering why bring that up. You know, it was something that made me wonder, because she said the men got better, everyone was fine, they went on with their lives, but they never had children again. That was weird, you know, and they kind of said something of the sort. And then it said her price that she had paid, and she kept bringing it up, and I thought that it had to do with, you know, I was just wondering why, what was that price, what did she lose in that transaction of getting her land back? Because she never explained that. Yeah. It was never explained.
Not yet. We're only halfway through the book, so.
Oh, okay. So that's why, you know, I just read a little bit ahead, because that was what kept me like, what did she lose in that, you know, why does she keep bringing that up?
Well, we have to know that.
The part that I saw, I'm sorry, just to address what you said about the men never had children after that, I thought about, you know, the whole notion of in history, how you kill all the family, you kill the children so that nobody comes back after you. So in her
back
way,
to that justice that we talked about.
Yeah, it's so that there won't be anybody of those owners that will grow up to then take their revenge and try to take the land back from her. So there was nobody that was going to lay claim to her claim. That's how I saw that part.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, so on that note, is 8:30 on the dot. I just want to let everyone know that next week we're going to discuss pages 129 through 198. That's chapters 11 through 17.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Very excited for next week. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.